to create some more content for you. He's talking about some directors he knows. These are the Teenage Film Snob hiatus shows.
Welcome to us, a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, your friendly neighbourhood film snob. We are back, me alone, in Film Snob HQ, coming up with another director's list and ranking them from lowest to highest. And we're going with a big one this week. The last few episodes, I've kind of deviated from the format a little bit. I've focused on movies from a certain region. We've done Europe and Asia and the UK. I've done a couple of other directors. But there have been a couple of notable ones that I've left off until now. And I think for me, it was just, I wanted to mix it up and talk about films and directors that don't get as much attention. But it's time for a big one. Let's talk about a filmmaker who needs no introduction. Their debut in the 90s shaped the filmmaking landscape there onwards, basically. They're always in the news when a film is coming out. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're the biggest filmmaker in the world, but definitely one of the top 10 that people talk about all the time. Today's filmmaker has been surrounded by controversy in the past due to the very violent nature of his films, due to some of the language used in his films, both cursing and racial slurs, due to the drug use in some of his films. However, he's also probably one of the most entertaining filmmakers that we've been blessed with. Not only are his films very entertaining, but he himself, when he sits down for interviews or panels, is very, very entertaining as well. I am, of course, talking about Quentin Tarantino. It's crazy that I recorded 16 episodes or whatever it was before talking about Quentin. But honestly, there was just so many other people I wanted to talk about, and everyone's talked about Quentin at some point. I've even done it in a separate episode. Jason Diamond from Midnight Terrors and Strange Diamonds came on, and we spent an hour or so talking about the films of Quentin Tarantino, so there was no rush to come in and talk about Quentin's movies, but he very much has shaped my fandom of films. I discovered him, as most film fans my age did, in my teenage years. Back when I first discovered Quentin Tarantino, he'd only made 3 movies, and now he's closing in on 10. He has constantly threatened over the last decade that he's going to stop making movies at 10. That might be why it's taken him so long to get to this one. His 9th film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, came out in 2019. It's been 6 years at the time of this recording. By the time this episode drops, it'll be closer to 7 years since his last film, which I think might be the largest gap between films, or very close to. The largest gap previously was between Jackie Brown and Kill Bill Volume 1, which I think was a 6-year gap between 1997 and 2003. So as of right now, Quentin is closing in on having the largest gap between movies made. Hopefully he doesn't stop at 10. I don't think he needs to. I don't think his style is kind of going out of fashion. I don't think his voice is getting quieter. I think he still has plenty to say. So if he wanted to keep making films for the next 20 years, I'd gladly welcome it. But if there's only one more to go, hopefully we go out with a bang. But we're going to rank them. This was, I think, maybe the easiest ranking I've done so far. There was one movie I actually forgot about, and I got down to the final 3, and I almost put something in 3rd place, which I didn't think was quite suitable, because I'd forgotten about the movie temporarily. But yeah, so every single film on this list I have seen multiple times. I think the one I've watched the least, I've still watched at least 3 or 4 times. So definitely a lot more familiarity with this filmography than some of the more recent ones. I'm not going to talk about Four Rooms because it's an anthology film and Quentin only directed a segment from it. We won't be talking about that. We're not going to talk about TV shows either, as I've said before. And this is probably my most honest ranking, in as much as there's nothing relegated to the bottom due to only one viewing. I've seen all of these many times. So there are 9 movies we're going to talk about today. And we're going to start in 9th place. And at the bottom of the list, in 9th place, let's start with Quentin's most recent film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I was really really excited for this movie. I'm always excited when Quentin Tarantino announces a film, when the trailers start playing and the posters start going up, and we don't really do radio ads anymore, but when all the advertising's in full swing, I always get very excited about the next Quentin Tarantino film. I'm always interested to see what he was doing. And this is probably the one I knew the most about heading into it. I started really paying attention around the release of Inglourious Basterds, and I didn't know much about that. I knew it was a World War II film. With Django, again, I didn't know too much other than it was a Western. With Hateful Eight, again, I didn't know too much. This was the first one I'd really heard quite a bit about. I knew it was set in the 60s. I knew it was around the time of the Manson murders. I knew it was going to be about Sharon Tate. So with all of that, I kind of had formulated in my head what I thought the movie was going to be. And I thought Charles Manson was going to play a much more prominent role in the film. It's probably more tasteful that he didn't. But I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I remember seeing all the photographs and imagery of the sets and how they changed all the streets in Hollywood to look like 1960s Hollywood. And I think for me, at this stage, it's a case of style over substance. It's not that I don't like the film. With each watch, I like it more. But it's one of his longest films, and I feel like it just kind of wanders. It just kind of meanders. And that's not to say that it's not a good film, and not to say it's not visually interesting. I just feel like the characters in this film, their motivations are maybe less inspired than some of the previous characters. You know, in Kill Bill, we've got a bride hell-bent on revenge. In Inglourious Basterds, we're trying to take down Hitler and the Nazis. Even in The Hateful Eight, we're trying to solve a mystery. In this one, it's just, you know, an actor trying to stay on top, trying to stay relevant in Hollywood, you know, as his career's kind of gone down in flames a little bit. And so I think because I'm so used to the crime element of Quentin Tarantino's films, it just didn't have maybe the same pacing that I was looking for. But at the end of the day, it's still a great Quentin Tarantino film. Both Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio are excellent. Margot Robbie is fantastic. The music and the visuals are incredible. That whole sequence where they go to, it's like a home base for all the cult kids, like all the kids who work for Manson. It's so funny because that film came out, and then over the following 5 years, every single person in that scene exploded and became a major star. Austin Butler became a major star. Margaret Qualley became a major star. Sydney Sweeney. Like every single person, every single young person who's huge in Hollywood today was in that scene, give or take. So it's a really interesting film. It's a lot of fun, but I just feel like of all the movies he's made, it's one of the longer ones. It just seems to have the least to say. At least the least to say that kind of appeals to me, I suppose. And that all just comes down to matter of taste. It doesn't mean I don't like the film. As I've said time and time again, I'm only talking about movies and filmmakers that I like. So it's just, I think, for me, a little bit lower on the scale. But that's okay. Heading into number 8, we started with his most recent film. So in 8th place, I'm going with Quentin's first film, Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs is an incredible movie. Revolutionized storytelling in the early 90s. Reservoir Dogs came out in 1992. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it's his first film. And it follows a group of bank robbers after the heist. So the opening sequence is before the heist. The credits play, and then when the credits end, the heist is already over, and it's the fallout from what went wrong, because the cops show up and they spoil it, and you don't ever see the heist, and that's the genius of this movie. Any other mainstream film, the film would be about the heist and the heist only. This is all about the intricate web of deceit that caused the heist to fall apart. Every single member of the group has an alias, and they're named after colours. So there's Mr. White, Mr. Orange, Mr. Blue, Mr. Pink. And they're all played by pretty incredible actors. You've got Harvey Keitel, you've got Michael Madsen, you've got Tim Roth. Quentin Tarantino is in one scene. He's in the opening scene. Steve Buscemi. And as the film plays out, it's just the remaining bank robbers trying to figure out who sold them out and get to the bottom of why the heist is over. Tim Roth's character got shot, and so he's bleeding out the entire film. Michael Madsen kidnapped a cop and tortures him while dancing to popular music. There are flashbacks to before the heist, so you can see the recruitment of each of the men and how they got involved. And it's just incredible. It's a really wonderful flick. The only reason I put it so low is because Quentin Tarantino has gotten infinitely better since this movie. Quentin Tarantino is an example of the model I've been using since day one of this series I've been doing. I keep saying that someone's first film shouldn't necessarily be their best film because then you can't track the growth. And I think of all the filmmakers I've been talking about, Quentin Tarantino has probably displayed the most growth over the course of his films. That doesn't mean all of his earliest films are going to be lower on the list, but a couple of them are. The other director who I'll talk about eventually is Edgar Wright, and I think he has had a very similar trajectory to Quentin Tarantino. But if you haven't seen Reservoir Dogs, it's amazing. If you would like to see Reservoir Dogs and can't handle 90s films, watch The Hateful Eight, because The Hateful Eight is kind of like a big budget remake of it set 200 years earlier, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Coming in at 7th place is Jackie Brown. Jackie Brown is the only film Quentin Tarantino ever made that he didn't write. He writes all of his own scripts. This was the one exception, and that's because it's based on a novel that he really liked. I'm just getting page up now. While I'm getting that up, Pam Grier is in the lead. Pam Grier was the star of many wonderful blaxploitation films of the 70s, particular Coffee and Foxy Brown. Those are two of my favorites. I really like Coffee. So this was kind of a shout out to those old films. And it was by Elmore Leonard, was the writer. So it was, so Quentin Tarantino wrote the screenplay, but it was based on a book. And it follows Jackie Brown, who works closely with a criminal played by Samuel L. Jackson. She has a bag of money, and she's doing a lot of smuggling for him. And then the cops get involved. Robert Forster and Michael Keaton play the two cops who are investigating her. And she has to do a bunch of deals between Samuel L. Jackson's character and a character played by Robert De Niro. And Robert De Niro's trying to hook up with this young lady played by Bridget Fonda. It's really fun. It's a really fun crime story. It is probably the least Tarantino film of the bunch just because it's not his writing, but it's a really great ode to the blaxploitation genre. It's a really fun mystery, and it's a really tight script. It's just a great all-round crime story, really, and it's very funny as well. And it's nice to see Samuel L. Jackson play a villain, because so rarely does he get that opportunity. He's almost always playing heroes, so it's a nice twist there to see him do that. But Jackie Brown is kind of the dark horse of the franchise. It's the one film that I think people have seen the least, and it's the one I either people say they haven't seen it, or they don't want to see it, or they didn't like it. And I'm not quite sure why, because Jackie Brown is excellent. It's really, really good and so worth your time. Moving along into 6th place, and we're closing in on the halfway mark already. This might be a quicker episode than I thought. In 6th place is The Hateful Eight. The Hateful Eight is the movie that almost wasn't. Quentin Tarantino had written the script for The Hateful Eight, and he was getting ready to shoot it, and then he suffered a data breach, and the script was leaked. And he decided he didn't want to make it anymore because with the story out there, what's the point? The whole idea about a Quentin Tarantino film is a surprise for everyone. And if it's not going to surprise people, if people are going to know what they're getting into, he had no interest in making it. What he did do, though, was then take the script and do a bunch of live table readings with the cast who were meant to star in the film. And the reaction was so positive that Quentin changed his mind and then filmed it anyway. He filmed it in the 70mm Panavision, I think it was. This was a big event film for Quentin Tarantino. He actually toured it in particular theaters that would allow 70mm projection. 70mm projection is what they used to film the old westerns on. And because this was a big western film with a great big scope, he really wanted to replicate the old feeling of watching those movies, those old westerns. Because everything's digital now, you don't get that same kind of feeling. A lot of that scope is CGI. This is all real. He used these big lenses, and if you ever look behind the scenes or reading the books about it, you can see just how incredible the camera work is. And if you watch that film, you can see the depth and the scope of each shot. It's quite remarkable. The Hateful Eight follows a group of travelers. We've got Samuel L. Jackson playing Major Marquis Warren, who is a Civil War hero of sorts. And he's on his way to a place called, I want to say it's Minnie's Haberdashery, where it's a kind of an old outpost, and he's bringing, he's trying to get out of the cold. We also have John Ruth, played by Kurt Russell, and he is somewhat of a bounty hunter. He's caught Daisy Domergue, who is a known bandit. Her brother runs a kind of ring of bandits, and they're quite notorious for murder and stealing and stuff like that. So he's heading off to take her to get hanged. When they arrive at Minnie's Haberdashery, they're greeted by some additional characters. There's a group of 4 people who seem to not know each other. Joe Gage, played by Michael Madsen, Oswaldo, played by Tim Roth, Bob, played by Demian Bashir, and an old Civil War captain, played by Bruce Dern. And it's basically these 8 people locked up in a cabin in the snow in one of the worst winters you've ever seen, and they hate each other. And that's why I said it's like a stylish remake of Reservoir Dogs, because they're all suspicious of each other. They don't trust anyone. Walton Goggins is there as well, I forgot to mention, and they're just trying to figure out each other's story and see who's telling the truth and who isn't. This is a long flick. If you watch the 70mm version, which I did when it came out, it came with an intermission, and it's 3 hours long. It's Quentin's longest film. And there's a lot of long, sweeping shots where you just see things. And that might sound a bit strange, like a weird way to describe a movie, because they're all things that you see. But sometimes the shots aren't there to progress the plot. It's just so you can see the set design. When you look at them moving around the cabin, sometimes they're not talking to each other. It's just so you can see all the different intricate elements in there. There's a lot of repetition. Like, you'll hear the hammering of the nails on the door a lot because the wind keeps blowing the door open. It's very experimental in a way, and I don't think Quentin Tarantino would refer to it as an experimental film. I think he would say it's a Western. But just the way that he has picked up so much from the old style of filmmaking, using those old, lenses, for example, making a 3-hour film where you could easily cut an hour out of it to make it move quicker, but choosing to leave it in because you just want the audience to see the work that you've done. There's a lot of experimentation there. It wouldn't be a Quentin Tarantino film without any violence, and I haven't really talked about the violence in the film so far. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is probably the least violent of all of his movies. There's a quick scene at the end. Marky Madison is also in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, who went on to win Best Actress last year. Reservoir Dogs is incredibly violent, very, very bloody. And then Jackie Brown's a little bit. This one definitely ratchets it up again. It's pretty chill for the first 2 hours, and then the last 45 minutes, all hell breaks loose, for lack of a better term. I don't want to say too much in lieu of spoiling the film, so I'll leave it at that. But Hateful Eight is a wonderful piece. Make sure you've got a nice chunk of time to sit down and watch it, because you want to watch it and experience it in one view. And if you've got a big TV or a projector, that's how you want to watch it. You want to see it on the biggest screen possible, because it was designed to be consumed. In 5th place, I think, is maybe the most divisive Quentin Tarantino film. I think a lot of people will be shocked to see I've put it this high, but I will say this is the one that I accidentally almost put in 3rd place, so you can thank me for dropping it down a little bit. I really like this movie. I think it's really underrated. I think it might be his lowest rated of all his films. I'm not quite sure, but it is Death Proof. I've talked about Grindhouse before, quite a bit actually, because a lot of the directors I've talked about made a trailer for the Grindhouse film. I spoke about Robert Rodriguez, who directed the other half of Grindhouse. And Quentin's half, he made a movie called Death Proof, and his whole idea was, most films in these Grindhouse kind of cinemas were serial killer movies. They'd run around with a big knife or a chainsaw or something. And he was like, I want to make a serial killer film, but instead of using a knife or a gun, he uses his car. And Quentin Tarantino is famously a fan of the old driving exploitation films, Vanishing Point, all of those. Mad Max, of course, and all those old exploitation films always had great cars, really cool car chases. So this is his kind of tribute to that. And the film is told in two parts. There are two sets of women who are targeted by the villain Stuntman Mike. Stuntman Mike is played by Kurt Russell. Our first group are a bunch of friends, a group of girls who are going out for a night on the town, hoping to have some drinks, maybe meet some boys, and party a little bit. And when they treat Stuntman Mike poorly, he targets them as his next victims. Rose McGowan, I should say, is in both parts of Grindhouse, and she shows up at the bar and she asks for a ride, and Stuntman Mike says, "I'm going to drive you home." And then he uses his car to murder her and then kill the rest of the girls as well. And the action sequences are really cool. Some of the dialogue, I would say, is a little bit cheesy, but I also think that's very much intended for the style of film it is. Like, one thing you'll notice about Quentin Tarantino, aside from the excessive violence and stylized imagery, is he does have a very particular way of speaking. His voice is very clear in all of his dialogue. And I would say this is maybe the one film that doesn't quite follow the mold, but I think it's because he's trying to replicate those cheesy 70s films. So there is some stuff in there, like for example, I think the most cringy moment is when Stuntman Mike talks about the phrase, "You're all right in my book," and then he pulls out a book and says he has a book in which he keeps all the people who are and aren't all right. And it's just a little bit silly, but I think Quentin Tarantino is allowed to be as silly as he wants. The second half of the film, we see our real heroes show up. We've got Zoe Bell, we have Rosario Dawson, we have Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and Tracy Toms. And they're all more action girls. They do a lot of stunt work. They like to do crazy things. They work on films and stuff like that. And when Stuntman Mike comes after them, they don't settle and let him kill them. They kind of stand up and fight for themselves and have this incredible car chase, which is really, really fun. So I like Death Proof a lot. And I like what he was trying to do there. One thing I should talk about as well, and I haven't touched on too much yet, is the music. Quentin Tarantino, aside from everything I've mentioned so far, is very famous for his needle drops. He loves inserting music into his films, and he loves, I think he would call it popular music, but I think you and I would say that we've never heard of half of these songs until we saw a Quentin Tarantino film. And every single film has a very specific soundtrack, unique to the story they're trying to tell. And I think the only one that doesn't really use songs is Inglourious Bastards. The rest use all sorts of songs. Oh, actually, Hateful Eight as well doesn't really use songs, except for one kind of Roy Orbison song at the end. But yeah, the music of Death Proof in particular is really, really cool and grimy and dirty and feels like it's, from a grindhouse cinema. Like it works really, really well. All right. We're heading into the top 4. In 4th place is the film that really put Quentin on the map. This is the one that I think, well, back when I was a teenager, this is the one that everyone would have said is the definitive Quentin Tarantino film. Now I don't know. I don't know what modern audiences would say about kind of the most definitive Quentin Tarantino film. I have a feeling a lot of modern audiences might not have even seen this flick, to be honest, which is so crazy to think of because so many of us would associate this with being like the Quentin Tarantino film. I am, of course, talking about Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction was huge. I remember hearing about Pulp Fiction when I was a kid. Because in 1994 it swept Cannes, it swept the Oscars. It was like a revival piece for John Travolta, who had kind of lost his way in his career, wasn't doing too much, and Quentin Tarantino brought him on and kind of gave him a big boost. Samuel L. Jackson got a lot of offers off this film. Uma Thurman was kind of an up-and-comer and got a lot of recognition because this film, Bruce Willis, Tim Roth again, Ving Rhames. It's just an incredible, incredible cast. And Pulp Fiction is just it's almost like an anthology film in itself. It follows a bunch of different interconnected storylines. So, in case you haven't seen Pulp Fiction, which feels insane to say, but again, I just don't know what modern audiences haven't seen. Like, I think there are other films people will think of before Pulp Fiction now, which is crazy to me. But John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson play two enforcers who work for a kind of like a mob boss played by Ving Rhames, and they go around trying to collect money for him, basically. The kids would know about this one because of the memes, I would say. Like that scene in the apartment block when he says, "Say what one more time," that's kind of been memed to death. But they go around, trying to collect money. At one point, Marcellus, who's the big crime boss, asks Vince to take his wife out to dinner and out for a good time and stuff like that because some of the guys in the group have been hitting on her, so he just wants to kind of show her a nice time, but also make sure it's someone he can trust, so he gets Vince Vega, played by John Travolta, and he takes Uma Thurman out to Jackrabbit Slims, and they dance and drink $5 milkshakes, which is so funny, because in 1993, 1994, the idea of a $5 milkshake was outrageous, but now it's easily twice that price. Bruce Willis plays Butch, who's kind of a down-on-his-luck boxer. He hasn't had a lot of success, and they're asking him to kind of take a fall, and he'll get a big payout. But instead he wants to prove himself, and then he has to run away because Marcellus has lost a lot of money because he decided to have integrity. And all these stories just interlock and cross over the course of 2 hours. 2.5 hours, I should say. It's a really fascinating flick. It was very unusual for its time. You didn't see a lot of stories told this way. It still holds up incredibly well, with the exception of one sequence. I've said time and time again, the one sequence I do struggle with is when they go and visit their friend Jimmy, played by Quentin Tarantino, who curses a lot and uses a lot of racial slurs that I don't think were really necessary in that part of the flick. But it's also a 30-year-old film, and times have changed and our standards have changed, and I'm not going to come after Quentin Tarantino. He's always used very provocative language in his movies, and his films have been received very, very well, so I'm certainly not going to, tell him off. But otherwise, it's a very entertaining film. If I am being honest, I think it's only this high on my list because of the nostalgia and because of what the film represents. I don't know if it holds up as well, especially alongside some of his more recent movies. But I'm happy with it in fourth place. Fourth place is pretty good. And now we're cracking down. And if you had have told me I would have put this movie at number 3, I would have laughed. I would have said, no, it's definitely lower for me. But looking over the list, I'm really happy with the placing of it. In third place is 2012's or 2013's Django Unchained. Django Unchained, the first time I watched it, didn't really resonate with me. I don't know why. I think I was just going through a bit of a phase. It was the first Quentin Tarantino film I watched and I wasn't quite sure about. It follows... I love it now. Obviously, it's in third place. It follows a slave named Django, played by Jamie Foxx, who is released... or kind of his release is paid for by a dentist, a German dentist called King Schultz. King Schultz or Schultz King? King Schultz, played by Christoph Waltz. And King Schultz is is a bounty hunter, and he's looking to make some money. And when he releases Django, he basically says, I'll train you to be a bounty hunter with me. We'll make some money together, and then we'll go our separate ways after the winter. And during their time together, they become friends and they learn about each other. And King Schultz learns that Django's wife was also sold into slavery, and King Schultz wants to help him get his wife back. And so they come up with a plot to find out where she was sold to and release her from the villainous Calvin Candy, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, in probably one of his best roles. It's so rare to see Leonardo DiCaprio play a villain. And in this role in particular, it's incredibly scary, to be honest. Django's wife is played by Kerry Washington. She plays Broomhilda. Samuel L. Jackson plays... He's not really a slave. He works at Calvin Candy's house and serves him as kind of a butler, but he's allowed inside and has certain privileges that other African American characters don't. James Remar has a couple of roles in it. He plays two different roles. Don Johnson's in it. It's a really, really interesting film. And what was fascinating is it came out around the same time as 12 Years a Slave. So you had these two films about slavery in the South during the Civil War, around the Civil War time. And one was this very serious portrayal of those events with Chiwetel Ejiofor, and really this heart-wrenching film. And the other one is this stylized action film. But they both managed to do a really good job of kind of showcasing or kind of telling the story of these atrocities and showing these wonderfully strong African-American characters overcome their kind of aggressors, if you will. Django has a very contemporary soundtrack, so even though it's set in like a pre-Civil War era, it does have a lot of modern songs. You got some oddly comedic moments. Quentin Tarantino plays an Australian. His accent is not great, but it doesn't mean I don't like it. Jonah Hill plays a KKK member in a very funny scene. If you ever thought you could watch a scene with the KKK and laugh, you would never have predicted it until this movie. But ultimately what it is, more than anything else, it's a love story. It's this love story between these two friends and, kind of how they kind of navigate the wicked world they live in this time period, but also a love story of a man trying to get his wife back. And it's really wonderfully executed, and it's violent and it's vicious and it's mean, but also it is a hero story, and it's really fun at times as well. It's an interesting flick for sure. And the more I watch it, the more I realize it's probably easily one of Quentin's best. When it came to 1 and 2, the top two films, I go back and forth on this all the time. All the time. When I've talked about my top 5 films, one of these films is mentioned regularly. I'm pretty open about what my top 5 favorite films are, and there's definitely a Quentin Tarantino film in there. But then when I talk about Quentin at a larger scale, the other film always comes up. So this was a really tricky decision for me. It's not even a matter of one day I like one and one day I like the other. Honestly, I think they're both equal first for me, but I'm sticking to the rules. So in second place, by a whisker, by a hair, is Inglourious Basterds. Inglourious Basterds is a fantastic movie. Surely people listening to this have seen it. It's set in World War II. And again, it follows a series of characters. We've got Shoshana Dreyfus, played by Melanie Laurent, who is a Jewish woman. She's French, and she's hiding under the floorboards of a farmhouse at the beginning of the film when Hans Lander, played by Christoph Waltz, first enters into the farm. And the first half an hour of this film, in fact, I think a third of the film isn't even in English. They speak in French, they speak in German, but English is not even the main language spoken half the time. And when he's introduced, he's interrogating this farmer about Jewish people hiding throughout the French countryside. And Shoshana's family is murdered, just shot through the floorboards, and she runs as fast as she can in one of the most climactic, intense openings to any film. We eventually meet Shoshana later, and she now works at a movie house in France. And she is being courted by a Nazi officer played by Daniel Bruhl, who's fantastic in the role. He's so incredible in this role, and he's a really pathetic character, but in a kind of beautiful way. It's really hard to express. He's in love with this girl. He loves movies, and he loves this girl, and he just wants to be with her. And he doesn't understand why she doesn't like him, even though he's a Nazi. He just doesn't get it. It's such a wonderful portrayal of ignorance and a lack of self-awareness. He's like, yeah, I wear these colors, but I'm a nice guy. I like movies. Never mind the fact that his politics are responsible for the death of her entire family. It's a really wonderful dynamic, and he's very, very good in it. Meanwhile, we've also got the Bastards, led by Brad Pitt as Lieutenant Aldo Raine, Sergeant Donowitz, played by Eli Roth, Archie Hickox, played by Michael Fassbender, Hugo Stiglitz, played by Til Schweiger. BJ Novak from The Office is one of the bastards as well. And basically what they do is they track down Nazis, kill them, and like keep one free so he can so that Alderaan can tag them with a swastika. Like he carves into their head and then sends them back to Germany to be like, tell them about us. And they're trying to kill as many Nazis as possible. There are a couple of very violent moments in the film, but it's actually not as violent as some of the other films. It's certainly not the last film I'm going to talk about. Diane Kruger is also in the film. She plays a German actress who's involved in the Bastards plot to take down Hitler and the Nazis. There is so much to talk about in this film, and there's just not time to do it justice. I might have to do a commentary or just an episode about Inglourious Bastards. If you have somehow managed to dodge this film for, since its release, which is almost 20 years now, stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing and put on Inglourious Bastards. It is an incredible masterpiece of a film. It is just perfect. It's a film I quote regularly. Nick Owen, my co-host, and I often refer to "Speaking the Kings," which is a quote that Archie Hickox gives when he's in the basement with all the Nazis. It's spectacular. Spectacular. But there can be only one number one. And the first Quentin Tarantino film I ever saw, it's not his first film, but it's my first Quentin Tarantino film. It mesmerized me the first time I saw it, and I go back to it every year. I watch both parts in the double feature because even though there are 2 volumes, it is meant to be one long film. It is an ode to the Shaw Brothers kung fu martial arts films of the 70s. It is a samurai film. It is a western. It is a love story about a mother and daughter. It is a revenge tale. It is Kill Bill. Kill Bill is my favorite Quentin Tarantino film. The story of a young woman who gets killed on her wedding day. 4 assassins walk into a small chapel in Texas and beat her up and shoot her in the head. And she does not die. She wakes up from a coma 4 years later to find her unborn child is dead, to find her husband was murdered, and she wants to seek out revenge. What is revealed is that she and the 4 people who killed her were once part of the same team, a league of assassins called the Deadly Viper Assassination Squad. Each of their code names came from a different snake, and their leader is Bill, and Bill ordered the hit simply because the bride decided to resign. The first film is a samurai film, top to bottom. We see the bride in the opening of the film confront one of her would-be killers, played by Vivica A. Fox. Her name is Vanita Green. They have a knife fight in her house. And the bride makes quick work of her. I'm going to spoil little bits in here, but I won't do all of it. The rest of the film is basically her tracking down Oren Ishii, head of the Japanese underworld, played by Lucy Liu, in probably my favorite Lucy Liu role. And this journey, she has to go to Japan to get a samurai sword that's strong enough steel to take down the head of the underworld. She has to hack her way through the Crazy 88, a group of trained Japanese assassins who work for Oren Ishii. There's a wonderful anime sequence which gives you the origins of Oren. We get to meet this mythical character, Hattori Hanzo, who is the ultimate swordsman. He crafts samurai swords and tools of death. It's very violent, but it's also very funny. And it's crazy to think the whole first movie is really about killing one person. Like, Vanita Green is there for sure, but the most important character that we're tracking down is Oren. We get a little bit of a glimpse at Elle Driver, played by Daryl Hannah. She goes in to kill the bride while she's still in a coma in a hospital, but Bill ends up kind of telling her to change her mind and don't do that, we'll kill her when she's awake. And that whole first film is just about getting to Japan and taking her down. The second part of the film is a western. Now the bride she's taken down 2 people. She needs to get 2 more and then head to Bill. She tracks down Bud, who is Bill's brother, played by Michael Madsen, and he has let himself go. He no longer uses his sword. He works at a strip club, and she goes to track Bud down. But then it also turns out that Elle Driver? Yeah, I was going to say Elle Wood. That's Legally Blonde. Elle Driver is also tracking down the bride, and Elle kind of makes quick work of Bud for the bride. And then they have a fight in a trailer, and it's incredible. Like, because if you think about a trailer or a caravan, there's no room to fight. It's so cramped, and that plays into the dynamics of the sword fight as well. We also get a lot more origins of the bride in part 2. We get to see her train with Paimei, the cruel master. The bride is an American blonde, of course, who Paimei hates. And he's cruel and he's wicked, but he has the ultimate discipline. He teaches her how to become a weapon. So we get to see all of that as well. In part 2, we see the wedding party as well and what's supposed to happen. And then we, of course, see the showdown with Bill. And I won't say anything else in case you haven't seen Kill Bill. But it's epic. Like, it is the most epic story. And I'm missing a lot of details. I've talked about the sequence in Volume 1 where the bride and Oren are fighting in the snow and there's blood on the snow because they've cut each other to bits, and the camera pulls out and you just see this little fountain ticking back and forth as they're killing each other in the snow. It is a masterpiece. It's so funny. It was so hard for me to decide, but as soon as I started talking about Kill Bill, I knew which film was meant to be number 1, and it is meant to be Kill Bill. Kill Bill introduced me to Quentin Tarantino. It made me discover his style. It made me a fan of his work. And to me, it's also a perfect film. So those are the movies of Quentin Tarantino. Don't despair if you feel like there wasn't enough conversation. He's going to keep coming up on the show. I know Nick wants to do a deep dive on the work of Quentin Tarantino, and we probably will do that at some point when I'm back from my hiatus. So stay tuned. We'll definitely do more of that. But that will whet your appetite for now, at least. So I'll do my ranking one more time, and then we'll get out of here. In 9th place, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. In 8th place, Reservoir Dogs. Jackie Brown is in 7th. In 6th place, it's The Hateful Eight. Right in the middle, 5th place, it's Death Proof. Pulp Fiction in 4th. Django Unchained in 3rd. In 2nd place, it's the incredible Inglourious Basterds, but number 1 had to be Kill Bill. And you have to include Volume 1 and 2 together because they're one whole story. It was meant to be released as a film. They didn't want to release a 4-hour movie, so instead of cutting it to bits, he released 2 parts. Thank you for listening. If you have your own ranking, let me know what was your first Quentin Tarantino film. I have a theory that the first Quentin film that we all watch ends up being our favourite one, and thus far it appears to be proven true, but I'd love to be proven wrong. Follow us on all the socials, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all those good things. Buy a t-shirt if you want as well. And we will have more content for you next week. But until then, thank you so much for listening. And as we say every week on this podcast, guys, I was a teenage film snob, but I'm trying to be better. We'll see you next week.